Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's take a live look at Gaza. We're going to be watching this camera closely because we've been seeing activity in real time, military activity in real time. It is dark. It is the early morning hours, Israel Standard Time, 4:17 in the morning there. We do have standing by with us here, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He's with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. I planned to have you on so that we could talk about Iran and the Middle East at large. Then I saw this explosion a few seconds ago, Mark. And I got to say, this is a reminder that while we've been covering everything going on between the Iran and Israel conflict and then the back and forth between Iran and the U.S., the Gaza war hasn't stopped, has it, Mark?
No, it hasn't. And there's still 50 hostages, 20 of whom are presumed to be alive, still in Gaza. The IDF has a mission. It's to locate and recover those hostages. And they're also working hard to continue to destroy Hamas so that someday Gaza can, be a self-governing state with a non-terrorist entity leading it. If the IDF does not destroy Hamas, Hamas will continue to lead that state, and there'll be a perpetual conflict with the Israelis.
Has there been enough discussion about a day after plan? There's a lot of discussion about inching closer and closer to a ceasefire eventually. In fact, President Trump says that he's predicting a ceasefire could come within a week. We'll get to that in a moment with you. But is there enough discussion about the day after plan?
There isn't, and I think now that the Iran issue has moved quite significantly, I think it's incumbent on Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, to begin discussing, in Egypt, to begin discussing what their roles are in a future of Gaza, because I don't think the best plan is for the IDF to govern Gaza as an occupying force. I think it'd be much easier for them to create a secure environment so that the Arab states can work with a non-Hamas Palestinian group to lead Gaza, out of the awful condition it's in. And that's going to take leadership, command, and money. And I think all three are kind of in short supply right now in the Arab world.
We've been talking since October 7th, 2023 about Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, about the fact that these are all Iran-backed groups. But my question this whole time is, how connected to Iran has Hamas been, especially in recent years? It's tough to get in or out, in fact, impossible to get in or out of Gaza. We know Hezbollah was Iran's primary proxy. So how much of a tie is there between Hamas and Iran at this point?
I don't think the relationship between Hezbollah and and Iran and the proxy groups in Iraq and Syria and Iran and even in the Houthis in Iran was stronger. There's no doubt about that. They were the primary vectors that Iran used. Not surprising because of a Shia-Sunni split. But Hamas did receive funding, they did receive training, and in fact had grown closer to Iran in the years leading up to October 7th. So they were part of, Iran's, octopus, their 6 or 7 areas of leverage that they're trying to bring against Israel. So were they part of it? Yes. Were they the primary force? No. And in fact, that was where the Israeli misjudgment came in on October 7th. I think they saw Hamas as generally, placid and accepting of their position and not working that hard with Iran. Obviously a misjudgment that had fatal consequences on October 7th.
Let's ask about what the IDF has been doing in Gaza this whole time. Obviously, the two main objectives since the start of the war has been to eliminate Hamas and rescue the hostages. So much of what we've been seeing, and unfortunately we didn't catch it live, but we did see an explosion in Gaza moments ago. What has the IDF been up to? What do they continue to do? And are they operating in southern Israel, from what you can gather? Because that's where this camera is planted.
So in general, I can't speak to this specific operation, but in general, Israel's been doing exactly that, attempting to identify, isolate, and defeat Hamas fighters with as much concern as they can have for collateral damage. They are challenged in that by Hamas's consistent use of human shields and buildings that are normally considered off limits, like a hospital or a school, as command and control centers or bunkers underneath them. And really, the killer in this is the tunneling. And the tunneling, as you look back now, was a several decades long enterprise that the IDF failed to understand the scope and scale of it. It was a complete failure by Egypt to control the flow of the equipment in and out that built these tunnels. I think we'll find that both North Korea and China contributed, either with technology or personnel, to this effort. This was a very aggressive effort to create a very hard condition for Israel. So Israel's been trying to defeat Hamas. You know, I think if you'd asked them, if you told them this is where they would be 18 months later, I think they'd be disappointed, you know, the IDF. But on the other hand, you know, they've got to get this job done, and they're continuing to maneuver. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, the 50 hostages are a key component of this.
One of the headlines of the day is this. Barak Ravid from Axios has it. Trump was quoted today saying, "I think we are close to a ceasefire in Gaza. I think we can get it done within a week." Mark, do we know why there's this new sense of optimism from the White House?
Well, I mean, we may have a ceasefire. I just don't know that we'll have the ceasefire. I think that's the you know, and I love that President Trump likes to use all caps. I'm glad he didn't put the in all caps, because I don't think this will be the ceasefire. It will be a ceasefire. We may get some agreements on hostages, some relaxation of limitations on movement for Palestinians in Gaza, things like that. But I don't think the final ceasefire is coming here, because I think the final ceasefire is going to it can only come when Hamas is truly broken.
So one more thing I wanted to ask you before we go, Rear Admiral, is I believe we have a tweet that's from Iran's supreme leader, if we can take that. This is what he posted. The Zionist regime must know that attacking the Islamic Republic of Iran will result in a heavy cost for them. That's one of the most recent things posted on his account that I've seen before I got on the desk. Why the venom in this message, Rear Admiral? Is this just how the Supreme Leader talks? I get a lot of comments from viewers asking why all of the rhetoric from this account sounds so harsh.
Well, first, I almost have to think this was hung up in his outbox for the last 2 weeks. Finally got some Wi-Fi and out it came, because this is clinically insane. I mean, there has been a heavy cost inflicted, and there was a 12-day air campaign by Israel, you know, culminating with a U.S. strike on Fordow. And in fact, I sort of wish the president had given Israel another 6 to 9 days of campaigning. They had more target sets. They could have restruck some targets that they didn't get properly the first time. But the Supreme Leader has a supreme misunderstanding of where the balance of power lies between Israel and Iran. And Israel has the ability to impose costs on Iran, and Iran does not have the ability to impose costs on Israel. Israel has good allies in the United States. Iran does not have good allies in China, Russia, and North Korea, because they've been nowhere to be found.
Before we head away from the Middle East, one final thing. Are there any diplomatic engagements between Iran and the U.S. to come? What do we know?
Undoubtedly, there will be. And I'm nervous, because the Israeli Defense Forces and the U.S. military won, you know, this 12-day campaign. As I said, more could have been done, a longer campaign, but they conducted the mission successfully. I think historically we've been challenged to follow that up with wins on the diplomatic court. And we need to make sure that the agreement we come out with has no reprocessing, no enrichment, complete dismantlement of the program, the nuclear program, no strategic missiles, and no relief on sanctions until all that is tight and verified.
So we not only wanted to cover the Middle East with you, Mark, we also want to cover this new agreement. We have been following closely all day today at the White House. President Trump welcoming foreign ministers of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Oval Office. They signed a peace agreement ending a 30-year conflict. We're going to get into this with Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery after a quick break. We'll be right back. I'm Austin Westfall. Welcome back. This is what you've been watching for a lot of the afternoon. We've been watching the live images from the White House, a number of meetings, a number of handshakes. Rwanda and Democratic Republic of Congo signing a U.S. brokered peace agreement earlier today. It raises the hopes for an end to fighting that has killed thousands of people and displaced hundreds of thousands more this year. The deal not only signaling peace, but it also comes as the White House is aiming to attract billions of dollars of Western investment to a region that is rich in valuable minerals. Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery is still with me. He's with the FDD. Mark, the agreement was signed earlier today. I believe we have some video of them getting this thing done. Yep. So you can't really see them, but they signed this in the State Department's treaty room beneath a portrait of Colin Powell. He was the first African-American to hold the job of the top U.S. diplomat. Secretary of State Rubio called this an important moment after 30 years of war. So, Mark, why the U.S.? Why is it the U.S. that's brokering the deal?
Well, two reasons. One, we were willing to do it. We stepped into the breach. This has gone on too long. I was in Rwanda last year. I mean, this is an extension. Most people understand there was a genocide in Rwanda in 1993. A lot of the bad guys fled into Congo afterwards. A lot of the Hutu war criminals. So Rwanda has always meddled or involved itself in Uganda, appropriately so. And in 1996-97, they were involved in several overthrows of government back and forth, Uganda and Rwanda. So there's been this ongoing thing, and there is a rebel group called M23 that operates near the Rwandan border into Congo, and it had recently captured a major city, which caused Congo to realize that they needed to kind of sue for peace, so to speak, come together, change some of the concessions they had requested. And so we were able to get this treaty. Now, the second and bigger reason is that Congo has $23 trillion worth of rare earth elements or minerals in it. And the United States is signing a critical mineral deal with Congo separately as part of this overall effort. So the United States is both using its power, its prestige and reputation to both get a peace treaty, but also to allow the U.S. to get access to some materials that otherwise we're very dependent on China for.
Will this actually stop the fighting? Is it that simple?
Temporarily, but first of all, the Rwandan forces aren't leaving. That was one of the concessions that Congo gave up on. And they'll move back. I think they'll trim down from 7,000 back down to their normal 4,000 troops. The M23 rebels aren't going to stop what they're doing. So I think this is a temporal thing. If there's more work to be done, it'll happen on the other, or there's a potential for some future ceasefire work is what I'd say that could get you to a long-term solution. There's an equal potential that both groups recover, recoup, rearm, and go back at it 4 or 6 months from now. So again, this is not an all caps ceasefire. This is a lowercase ceasefire, and we'll see what happens over time.
Are the U.S. and China fighting for influence in Africa?
Yes, we are. It's probably not as direct as it was during the Cold War with the U.S. and the Soviet Union, where countries chose sides, but diplomatically and militarily. But we're competing economically. And look, China's been in Africa for the last 20 years, extracting natural resources in a very disproportionate, economically unfulfilling, and environmentally dangerous way. And as a result, they've opened the door to the United States to step in as a more responsible partner. Historically, our companies, they're not perfect, but they create more local jobs. They do less environmental harm, and they divide the wealth a little fairer. So we'll have to see what happens over time with this, but it certainly is a nice kicker for the United States. And if it gets us more involved in Africa, I'm for it, because we had kind of abdicated our responsibility here over the last 2 decades.
Retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thanks for being generous with your time tonight. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.